Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the devCodeCamp Alumni Spotlight. My name is Carl Peterson, devCodeCamp social media producer. And I think maybe we should start with the very, very, very basics. What is your name and what do you do?
My name is Joshua Berrios, or you can call me JB. I'm actually a fellow podcast host for a podcast called Code Fellowship. But what I do on my day job is I'm a UI UX developer for a company called Layer One or layer1media.com.
Perfect. Yeah, Josh, thank you so much for making time for us today. I feel like it's been a long time coming for this episode, and I'm so grateful for you to be here today. I won't make it too hard for you, but you did mention Code Fellowship, and I that's funny because I was going to mention that the second question briefly. Obviously, you had me on as a guest a couple months ago, and agents have been knocking down my door. Autographs have been nonstop. So thank you for that opportunity for sure. But I also wanted to say that on that podcast, it was discovered by me. I think you already knew, obviously, because you're the one that brought it up, but or maybe we found it at the same time. You were in class at Dev Code Camp during the time I joined as an employee, as a social media
Yeah.
producer. So we have that parallel, but it's been over a year now since you graduated. And I was wondering, kind of a year and some change in, obviously.
About to hit a year, actually.
Oh, okay. Not
Yeah.
yet. Not yet. So it's just
Not
right under
yet.
a year. Okay.
Very
Okay.
close.
Okay. So I was wondering, almost a year in, how do you personally continue growing as a developer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I am a type of person that just really I do go suffer through that shiny tool syndrome, right? So when there's like a new framework or a new tooling, I have to like get my hands on it, check it out. And if it's not for me, then I put it to the side and I carry on. When I was in Dev Code Camp, I learned how to become a full stack web developer in the MERN stack, which is MongoDB, Express.js, React JS, and Node.js. We even learned about like JWT tokens, how to connect Mongoose and like MongoDB. So like there's other toolings, right, in between those acronyms that pertain to being a full stack web developer. And that's just a particular tech stack. But I do come from a WordPress background. And I was already doing stuff from a WordPress environment, load code, HTML, and CSS, a little bit of JavaScript, copy and paste from Stack Overflow and whatnot. Um, but as I learned how to do good research in DevCode Camp, I also learned how to become a developer that's able to adapt to adversity. So if I don't know an answer to something, I go out and research, I learn, and I try to apply instantly. I think it's also something that I'm used to from being in the military. I'm an Army veteran, and sometimes we had to learn things on the fly. Like I was a truck driver, but I was in charge of a radio communication shop, and I barely knew anything about radio communications. So I took weeks on weeks and read like these really thick manuals that I read it page by page. No, but I looked for what I needed. Luckily, we had like digital versions of these technical manuals as well. And I think that and like what I got from Dev Code Camp really allow me to progress as a developer. Even to this day, I'm learning some very difficult things that is happening within our organization at Layer One, specifically like a platform called Psycor that I'm a complete stranger to. Don't really like the platform per se, but it does push the boundaries of how I learn and how I apply on the job.
That's a great answer. Yeah, thank you for that explanation. And we'll go a little bit more in detail with Dev Code Camp specifically in just a few here. But um, I think you kind of perfectly summarized a really big perk that Dev Code Camp has, and it's one that it's such a reoccurring topic on this within these alumni spotlights, and it's learning how to learn.
Yeah.
Because obviously technology is moving lightning speed, and you can learn something super, 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 super good, but next year there may be a completely different evolution of that. And yeah, totally, totally great that you picked that up. And also, I wanted to say thank you very much for your service as well from
No,
from
thank
myself
you,
and my
sir.
family. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. So,
appreciate it.
as far as a UI UX designer, from a
Developer.
very excuse me, developer,
You're good.
from a
You're good.
doctor for a doctor UI, let's just keep adding titles. No, but from a very, very high level, what does a
Yeah.
typical day look like for that position?
Yeah. So, what's interesting is the way that the UI UX developer role is in layer one is not your typical like corporate version of a UI UX developer where literally their concentration is that, right? UI UX things. There's times where we have to fulfill other roles, right? Other aspects when it comes to how we interact with the client, how we help each other, right? So like I have full stack knowledge, and if in some case if I do need to help a software engineer in our team with some full stack stuff, even though their stack is different than mine's, just being able to be like a rubber duck or just bouncing off and reading the code and just giving ideas, right, is sufficient, right? It's a different role than just being a UI UX developer. But if we go back to the beginning of that question and really concentrate on it, yeah, daily life of a UI UX developer at layer one is really taking into account what brings value from a visual standpoint and a user flow standpoint to the client's customers, not the client itself. We bring value to the client, that's always going to happen. But how do we bring value to the customer, the end user at the end of the tunnel when that product is all launched and ready to go? And that's something that I take into consideration. And I'm also learning not only how the organization does it, but just how the industry does it as a whole. I come from a UI UX design background, especially working with the WordPress side of things and low code tools. But being a developer is very different because now you have to take all these visual concepts that are not interactive. A lot of them are not in prototype mode where you can click around, it's literally just still. And a developer mindset is really to translate that over into code, obviously, but you also think about how it interacts with the client, meaning in this time, the browser, right? How it interacts with the browser. That's the client now that I'm talking about. What type of technologies will we use to manipulate the DOM so that way it's efficient, performant, also accessible to those customers. So that's literally in a nutshell what a UI UX developer is from my perspective, right?
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
that and that's how I perceive it, and I really enjoy it because there is a lot to learn. I'm actually reading a book called Lean UX that my team lead told me to read, and it talks about just designing great products in an agile team. So there's a lot of practices in this book that also helps have a UI UX relationship with your peers, not necessarily what you're building and developing. So a lot of principles carry over. Go along.
Sure. That's great. Thank you. Thank you also for that explanation too. It almost seems like you're kind of looking at a puzzle, but you're also kind of making the puzzle in a in a weird in a weird way. It's like you're trying to solve your own really. And when you're looking at these blank states of working environments, do you strive in those moments? Is that where you're kind of in your happy place as a developer?
If there's a blank slate, yeah. But actually I've gotten assigned to projects where the blank slate is not there at all, per se. Uh, I've already been in projects where there's already been work that's been done by previous developers or some type of head start code, and now it just we have to bring it to life in a different way. So now we have to like study how the UI UX is working with this head start code, how things are being applied from a styling perspective. I've been learning how to use SAS, which is syntactical awesome style sheets, syntactically awesome style sheet, or SCSS. And there's a lot of cool things within that tooling, that piece of technology that makes styling a whole lot easier than just traditional CSS. Um, but when you start looking into a project that already has like this massive, already well built out, well, I wouldn't say well built out. A lot of times it could be some
Just
technical
there.
debt. Yeah, some
Yeah.
technical debt that you have to consider. And then you have to brainstorm, okay, how am I going to get past that technical debt or that problem and get to a tangible state where I can produce value to the client from a visual standpoint, or even not even from a visual standpoint. I'm also learning how to provide value to a client just by communicating with them through an email, keeping them up to date, asking for things that we need, giving responses at a timely fashion. So if it's interesting because a UI UX really a lot of its principles do go hand in hand with just the way that you work, the way it flows, right? Not just visually, but just the relationship you build with your team and the clients that you're working for.
Sure, makes total sense. You know, obviously being a developer has a lot of fun moments and also very rewarding moments. But when you talk about these, so what did you call it? Something debt?
Yeah, technical debt, like
Technical
they're
debt. Yeah, I love
yeah,
that phrasing.
just problems that
Yeah,
you didn't foresee, but they've existed.
you
Yeah.
have to face them. Yeah, when those projects, when you have to tackle them, and it's longer and it's tedious and it's
Mm-hmm.
a pain, what keeps you motivated?
Um, to be honest, quite frankly, I didn't really know how to approach, the aspect where I'm stuck on something. I mean, people tell me, yeah, reach out to any one of us, raise your hand and stuff. But I went in just trying to really learn and apply, and then also flex some of my own knowledge and skill sets and see if they can be applied to my work. But I started noticing that, sometimes you do have to like take a step back, you got to humble yourself, and you do have to raise your hand, so that way you can be successful as a developer, because you're not going to know all the answers. And one thing that I'm learning a lot, from a fellow developer on YouTube, he has a community called Learn Build Teach, and the model is to, when you're learning, you're building and you're teaching, and when you're teaching you're also learning at the same time, again, because you're retaining all that information. And I've been able to somewhat do that within my organization. It's super awesome. Like layer one is definitely very unorthodox, and I thought it was gonna be. I thought I was gonna be like almost in this like corporate agency type of environment. You are your own, let's say, individual, right? You do have to own up for your work, and then how you manage your time throughout the day if you're working on multiple projects. But at the end of the day, you still work as a team. Everything, all those puzzles that you're talking about, those puzzle pieces, they do come together. You are as a UI UX developer. Our purpose and our goal is to also teach the full stack engineers best practices as best as possible, because then that allows us to do more of the extraordinary things that we're good at, from a UI UX standpoint. But just teaching also helps facilitate a much better environment when it comes to working and producing good code and visual styling.
Yeah, very insightful. So let's talk devCodeCamp, shall we? devCodeCamp
Sure.
Alumni Spotlight. Let's talk a little bit about devCodeCamp. So we know it was coming up on a year ago. If you can recall, what kind of student were you?
I was a student. JJ might laugh when he listens to this, because one day he told me, Josh, Like, you can't speak. You just can't. Don't.
Please stop
And
talking.
and it's not because I necessarily talked a lot. It's because I had already a foot in the door compared to all the other students. I was already exposed to the web industry. Even though I didn't do full-time like development with hand coding a lot of the times, but I was exposed to how the philosophies of user interfaces and user experience, which is UI UX, the philosophies and methodologies of just how design is supposed to convey emotion, or how how you should be placing certain things. Then like I knew HTML and CSS. So I already had those solid understanding of how certain those things work. From a syntax perspective.
Sure.
JavaScript was definitely very new to me because I didn't really take the time to learn JavaScript prior. So that was challenging, but I was able to apply a lot of knowledge that I was also taking outside of the classroom environment, because that's what makes you a good developer, is being able to not go the way that they tell you to go, but also like being able to like, make some stops along the way and obtain information from both ends of the spectrum that may not apply, you know. So there's a lot of that stuff that I had a foot in the door in for with a couple of years of experience, and that really helped a lot of students out, like learn. But I also made sure I didn't answer a lot because I wanted the students to learn. So I felt bad, right? This is new to them. It's not new to me. And then also I wanted the instructors to do their job, right? I didn't want to, step any toes or boundaries. But there was a time where I was just constantly giving answers because I was just really excited to give these answers and really flex the knowledge that I had, which is a good thing, right? As long as it doesn't come off very condescending or
Sure.
cocky.
Sure.
But I really enjoyed it, and it was so funny when JJ told me not to speak, not to say anything. Right?
So during this time though, did you ever have a time of, I mean, you say you had a foot in the door, but along with that though, it's complicated sometimes
Mhm.
too. For sure, I would say even with someone who has a foot in the door. So was there ever a time during the course you had a bit of self-doubt? And if so, how did you overcome that? Or did you have none at all? Were you just home run after home run?
Yeah, so I didn't necessarily have self-doubt. I think my biggest issue was perfectionism. So that was the biggest issue. That was the biggest challenge because um when it came to the front end, that's something that I have a passion for, is making sure it looks really nice. But one thing that I learned from devCodeCamp is like the way the front end looks doesn't matter if it doesn't function. So that was a critical aspect that I had to let go of. Like the way that it functions, it's what people look for in an MVP, right? Um, and I kept learning, and they kept saying, what will get you to MVP? What's gonna get you to MVP? Right? And it's like, and then focus on styling at the end. But if you're good enough, then you can, style as you go, right? But even then, I didn't really like I did do it, and I saw that perfectionism actually took away from the aspect of trying to code something that's functional. And functional is different in this full stack world, because all the functions, a lot of it is really coming from the JavaScript side of things, instead of like HTML and CSS. Like I would be very confident to like, give you something HTML that's functional, right, in a way,
Sure.
right? but it's not, it's really its primary purpose, where all the nooks and crannies, the meat and potatoes was in the JavaScript aspect of the website. And just learning the concepts, like some concepts I understood, but I wasn't too disciplined in them. So then again, I also had to let go of like, oh yeah, I can like nitpick how many pixels do I want my border radius to be? How do I want my shadow to look like? Just a lot of that. That was the biggest challenge for me.
Sure. Yeah. Also, you're having to stay on a path, on a
Mm-hmm.
time limit. So it's like I don't have time to do
We had
this either.
my cohort was 2 months compared to everyone else's,
Oh
because
yeah.
I went in using my GI Bill. So the GI Bill, I during that time I found out really late that I could use it for a tech school or some type of tech program like a boot camp, and that was during the COVID era,
Sure.
and then it was a deadline, which is December 21st. So like I ended up in a cohort which was only like 2 months in its entirety. And so they were cramming a lot of stuff in. And my brain was like noodles, but I had to keep it together, because what really motivated me, and this is probably going to answer that portion of the question, what really motivated me was just the future for my family. Like, where is this going to take me at the end? Like, as a Christian, um, I've learned, and we learn not to put our faith in man, right? Because man fails, Christ doesn't. So I always reminded myself of that, right? Like, okay, yeah, they have a career services, right? But it may not help me. I should probably start doing some stuff on my own as well. Pray about that stuff, let God guide it. And that's how I went. And career services was great as well. Um, don't get me wrong, you guys have a really good career services program, and I see the passion you guys have for the students, but there's that, for me it's always been like taking self initiative. Never wait for someone to do something for you, and present those thoughts, those feelings, right, or those perceptions and your desires to the program. Be like, hey, I want to go this route. Are you guys able to help me out? Right. Stuff like that. And because I thought about my family, I thought about that future, and I didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck anymore. I do get like military benefits and stuff like that, but that pays for my house. There's the other check that needs to like help feed my family,
Sure.
and maintain the lights. But that's what really kept me through. I mean, the story is really long, but long story short, my wife is very supportive, and she saw just the passion that I had every day after class, or even like when I did my capstone, like how I was so into my computer. My mother was in town when I was still working on my capstone project, and she was like, "Wow, like it's incredible how you're so like focused."
That's awesome.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail us,
No,
but
you
it
didn't
was
derail
I'm
at all.
very
It's just
passionate about my experience with
yeah,
devCodeCamp.
she's probably looking at it like where was this Josh 15 years ago?
Well, she would tell you it was the same Josh, but in a whole different, like a
Oh,
higher
sure.
level. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
That's awesome. No,
Mhm.
that's not a derail at all. Thank you for telling that. So if you could go back and tell yourself one thing, that's the rules, only one thing
Mhm.
at the first day of your course, what would it be?
If I can go back and tell the Joshua at day one of the course is um MVP. Focus on MVP, right? And
Right.
have fun, right? Continue to have fun. I did have fun, right? But continue to have fun and stay humble, continue to help others, right? Just all the things I was already doing, but just harp in capital letters, with the sign that says MVP, right? MVP. Because I feel like there are some of the projects that I could have excelled and aced completely if I would have put a little bit of extra time into like the MVP aspect, the functionality of things.
Cool. So we're wrapping up. I got two more questions for you. So if you could summarize the most important thing you walked away with from devCodeCamp, what would it be? It's a bit of a big question. So
Mm. Mm. Can you repeat that question again? My Understood.
absolutely. Yes. Are you being serious?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
thought you were joking. Yeah, absolutely. So if you could summarize what the most important thing is that you walked away from devCodeCamp with, what would that one thing be that you would say that's the most important thing I took away from this?
Yeah, I think the most important thing I took away from devCodeCamp um was just staying on track, on course, right? Just staying the course. Trust the process. Put fingers on the keyboard. That's something that JJ always said as well. Put fingers on the keyboard. Even my senior UX developer lead at layer one tells me, hey, you won't know if you try it, right? And that's just another way of saying put fingers on a keyboard. And then trust the process. That was something that was just always trust the process. Trust the process. And I love that devCodeCamp was project based because that really gave you a sense of how to work by yourself. Then we had group projects. Then we had an individual capstone. Then we had a group capstone. So the intensity just kept getting higher with as we went on, right? And I can remember that when our team felt like it was in shambles, um, I was actually like the project manager for our team, so I couldn't code. So you know how hard that was? It was really hard because I wanted to code. I wanted to help the team. And all I could think about is staying the course, helping my team stay in the course, guide them along. And, I'm going to say the truth here and be transparent. I did code a little bit, right? I had to. I just couldn't,
I'll
right?
cut this part out. We can't let poor JJ's heart break knowing. I didn't know what you were
uh,
going to say there, Josh, but I didn't think it was going to be that. You know, you've mentioned two things that really have stood out to me in the last couple questions, or the last couple answers, rather, which was one, you mentioned that you had initiative, especially in the career services side of things. You took your own initiative. And then the second thing you just said in that answer, you said trusting the process. And, time and time again, there's a lot of ways that a student can succeed.
mhm.
But trusting the process, but also collaborating not only with us, but contributing, things that factors that help you as well. That is a huge secret to success.
It is.
And it's massive. And we see that time and time again. And that's definitely something we're open about to students as well, because it works, right? Trusting the process and also taking your own initiative when you need to. And there's a reason we're sitting here right now, and you're a professional working developer less than 1 year later. You have been,
Yeah.
and there's a reason for that. And I think that there's a lot of factors into your success, but I think those two things that you said really highlight and drive home why we're here today. So congratulations on your success. And I have one last
Thanks.
question for you.
Go ahead.
If somebody was watching or listening to this right here, right now, and was very interested in pursuing devCodeCamp as a student, what would you say to them?
Yeah. First and foremost, if you're of the faith, pray about it. Right? Always pray, consult with the Father, and He will guide your steps. And the next thing that I would say, as a general, as a whole, for any student, is take that leap of faith. Right? Take it. We got to risk it to gain some, right? Um, and do your research too. If you feel like devCodeCamp's not for you, you did research. But if you go in and you're already in and then you feel like it's not for you, go for it. Keep going. Because there were some students in my cohort that eventually they couldn't figure this whole thing out. They thought they felt like they blamed the curriculum, but in reality, they were just ready to expand their brain, right? To use a lot of muscles. And so you got to go in knowing that it's going to be challenging, right? But you have to have this mindset of perseverance, knowing that you can push through. Especially if you're a veteran, my fellow veterans that are students trying to break into tech and going through devCodeCamp, think about boot camp. Those first couple months are treacherous, right? But the thing that we had to do is just keep trooping through, and things will start to make sense. Things will start to make sense. Ask questions, enough questions. Don't just keep things to yourself. No question is a stupid question, right? And one of the things I really love about the way that that devCodeCamp had it structured with the Slack channels, they always tell you, hey, use your instructor chat, drop it down there, right? Raise your hand. And then you would say, hey, I got a question. I got an answer, they would say, right? So that in the simplest way is what I would encourage potential students of devCodeCamp to do. Don't judge the book by its cover, right? Because you never know what treasure you're gonna find when you open that treasure chest. And devCodeCamp has been a blessing in my life and for my family as a whole.
Josh, that's a heck of a way to end this episode. Because truthfully, I've done 95% of these alumni spotlights. Paul did them before me, a little bit before I joined, but I've done like 95% of them, and I can tell you right now that that's some of the best advice that's ever been dropped in this podcast, in this in the alumni spotlight series. So beyond thank you, my friend, for coming on here once again, and also sharing not only insight but valuable insight. I know for a fact that you have helped someone listening out there, I'm sure, whether they're a current student or wanting to pursue it, or even not a student at all, just a developer. You dropped a lot of insight about just the developing life as well, developer life. So thank you beyond belief. Long time coming, but I think well worth it.
Yeah, definitely. It was at the right time, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So everybody, once again, if it's your first time coming by, or if you've watched every one of these, thank you so much for giving us just a little bit of your time today. Josh, thank you once again as well. I can't say that enough. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you guys. God bless.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, everybody. My name is Carl Peterson once again, and I'll catch you in the next one.